Thank you, everybody, for attending. This is going to be a discussion of the direct video capability, the products that we're offering for that function, and also the application of direct video. We'll discuss several technologies, including embedded browser and VGA monitors and things like that. Topics we're going to cover: of course, a summary of the offering, some of the benefits of the direct video compared to previous ways of setting up substation HMIs, a little history of how we got to where we are today. We'll talk about the built-in OrionLX web page browser, some economics on direct video versus alternate solutions, and then we'll talk about the direct video product features that can be ordered, as well as the 19-inch touchscreen, which is now available. As the picture shows, the VGA monitor is attached to the VGA port on the OrionLX Multimedia Board. The Multimedia Board is a new physical option on the OrionLX. The keyboard and mouse will be attached to the USB ports, also on the OrionLX Multimedia Board. You can have a second connection to the VGA monitor if you are going to be using the touchscreen features. A single connection is only required if you're going to use a mouse, but a second USB connection to the monitor is required if you want to use the touchscreen capability. Any of you that have used the LX will note that we do have USB ports on the back of the OrionLX. With this option, those ports become activated, so you can connect the keyboard and mouse and the one or two connections from the touchscreen into those ports or the USB ports on the multimedia board. And that's what that multimedia board looks like. A little more detail. The multimedia board, of course, includes a VGA monitor port with SXGA resolution and XGA resolution. There are two additional USB ports, USB 4 and 5, and that complements the USB 1, 2, and 3 ports that are already built into the OrionLX. There's an audio out port on the multimedia board, like the port on your PC, and we were able to include a third Ethernet port. Some of our customers like to have physical independence on 3 separate networks, each with a separate interface controller, and that enables us to create a topology similar to what you see in this next slide. This is one customer's application of the third Ethernet port, and they're using one substation LAN and 2 physical connections, one for engineering and one to SCADA. This is not the only way you could use this, but it's just one way that one customer is using this. They like the physical independence of those 2 links to engineering and SCADA. They could have used a VLAN, but they preferred this physical independence. That's what the multimedia board looks like when it's installed in the OrionLX. It uses that available space just above the power supply options there. So why did we do direct video? Well, we did it to enable the customers to have a less expensive substation HMI, and the best way to do that is to eliminate the PC. We also wanted customers to be able to more easily meet some of the emerging NERC CIP standards by eliminating the PC. The PC in a critical cyber substation is considered to be a critical asset now, and is subject to patching and some of the other activities that are required by NERC CIP. Also, to enable some users to accomplish additional tasks with Orion that used to only be able to be done with a PC. Things like viewing communication between Orion and IEDs or between Orion and SCADA, transferring files to and from some attached media like a USB memory stick, running Wireshark, making screen captures, editing text files. You'll be able to edit an NCD file. If you want to change a baud rate or something, you'll be able to do that right on the Orion. You won't have to attach PC. There's a calculator and there's a number of other functions. So when we put this direct video capability into the Orion, we run a browser in the Orion. We actually serve the web pages out and we browse them at the same time. That's what enables us to use the VGA monitor. But we've also added in some features that you normally would have done on your PC. So it should reduce the number of times or the amount of times that you need to connect your PC. We offer some page viewing flexibility. This is a hypothetical substation. There's the Orion. There's the monitor and the keyboard attached, SCADA engineering connections. So any page that's served from the Orion LX can be viewed on the attached VGA monitor. But at the same time, on engineering, the same page viewed on the substation VGA monitor can be viewed by any browsing PC. So just because we now have a VGA connection to view the pages that are served from Orion, we also retain the ability to browse and view those web pages with the PC, locally or remotely. Okay. The other thing, if you had really good eyes, you could see that the page that's displayed there is actually a Bytronics web page from the Bytronics 50 series. So it's also possible to view web pages from other substation IEDs. So if there's an IED in your substation that serves out a web page like the Bytronics 50 series, that also can be viewed on the VGA monitor. How did we get here? A brief history of the Substation HMI. As many of you know, the first generation of Substation HMI was a PC running Substation HMI software, and that may have looked something like this. Industrial PC would be running Wonderware, NovaView Plus, PowerRich, SciTech, any number of maybe a dozen packages that were used in or are used in substations. Then there was a ruggedized PC. That's a fairly popular ruggedized PC shown there. And then there was a connection to the VGA monitor from the ruggedized PC and connections to the keyboard and mouse. This solution works fine, but many customers have considered it way too costly. Some customers have given us figures that would indicate that that part of the system is as expensive as the remainder of the automation, the RTU, and everything else. So I think that the high cost of the conventional PC running Substation HMI software has limited its application. Again, it works fine, but there's software licenses, there's configuration effort and learning curve can be high. The PC is expensive, and then of course there's NERC compliance costs. In a few slides, we'll summarize some of those costs. One of our customers from Southwest U.S. has provided us some of the costs that they're incurring for NERC compliance, and they gave us the green light to share those costs with you. Second generation for Substation HMI was to browse HMI web pages with a PC. And that has a similar hardware look where there's an industrial PC running a browser. The Orion serves out the web pages that are viewed on that industrial PC. This is considerably less costly, but still requires the NERC compliance, because that PC is still considered a critical cyber asset. Third generation, this is the direct video. The simplified approach, the VGA monitor, keyboard, and mouse are connected to the LX. And of course, the VGA monitor does not require NERC compliance. There's there's no routable protocol there. Some of the costs for NERC CIP compliance for a substation PC. In order to look at costs, we have to start with some assumptions. Let's assume that the PC in the substation runs a Windows operating system. And for this illustration, let's assume there's 30 substation HMIs to maintain. It's important to make an assumption there because some of the activities related to compliance are done one time for all of the substation HMIs that are owned. And let's also assume that patches can be installed remotely. Let's assume that you don't have to physically drive to the substation and install patches. Let's assume you have some kind of a secure link to the substation for patch management. And then we'll just look at costs for 5 years. We don't know how long we're going to have to do some of this patching and such, but for this illustration, we just used 5 years. So, create a little table of the activities, time, a little calculation, and then a resultant 5-year cost. So the activities, the 3 main activities, would be a review of the Microsoft updates that are related to the embedded XP or whatever operating system is being used. And there are quite a few of those that come out. This utility reviews them weekly. He says that the frequency of review could be less than that, but they have a large number of PCs throughout their entire operation, not just in substation, but in other places in their power system. So they do have to review the Microsoft updates weekly. The next is an assessment. There's some time that's required to determine whether these updates need to be installed. And then there's an approval process as to whether they're going to actually put this in and where. These all take time. And then there's the actual implementation, uploading the patch to the automation processor or to the substation PC, and then a process to verify that no unwanted changes occurred. So I asked them, what's the reasonable amount of time that you would spend on this? And this can vary, but they said that about a half hour a week to review the Microsoft updates. They do about 10 updates per year to the PCs that they have. The assessment process is about a half hour. Approval can vary, but about a half hour probably is a good figure collectively. And then, of course, installing those patches in the substation PC, that would be 10 updates a year. Implementing it, uploading the patch, doing some verification, maybe another half hour. Now, I've talked to some folks that says you can't do anything in less than an hour, but if I put an hour on these times, I think it makes the illustration questionable in some people's eyes, so I try to keep it to theoretically what could it be in a well-run operation. Anyway, we do the calculations, and basically what it works out to is about $3,000 to $4,000 on a 5-year period for a given substation HMI. It works out to be about a half hour a month per substation HMI. So it's not an exorbitant amount of time, but it does add up. And so we've used these figures in some of our calculations, $3,000 to $4,000 over a 5-year period for a PC that's installed in the substation and some of the compliance costs. We would welcome any additional input from our attending customers this webinar. We would welcome any input from them after this webinar as to how to make these figures more accurate, because this is one utility that has a major NERC CIP program, but we would like to get some additional data points here. Using the built-in OrionLX web browser, it's actually Midori. That's an embedded browser. It's light, embedded, and fast. The concept here is sometimes hard to understand, that Orion serves out web pages, but Orion also browses its own web page. So you can think of Orion as browsing web pages that other people can browse as well. But when Orion browses its own web pages, well, then we can do something with the web page. We can send it out a VGA port. So think about Orion as doing something that your PC would do. It's browsing the pages that are served out. Then it's easy to understand why we have to use a browser, why we have to have a desktop and things like that. And also the fact that other people can still browse pages. Just like a website up on the internet, multiple people can browse the pages that are served from that. And with the Orion, multiple people can browse the pages that are served from Orion. This is the screen that you're greeted with. And you'll notice up in the upper left-hand corner, there are applications. Take a closer look at those. These are applications that enable you to get more out of this embedded browser. We'll go through each one of these and some of the key features. There's a ability to open a command line window, very much like you would do on your laptop PC. Settings, calibrate the touch screen, preferred applications, etc. The calibration utility, you move your cursor and click at that crosshair, click in the middle of that, and it moves to another place on the screen, and you click several places on the screen, and that calibrates your screen with your touch or with your mouse. You have some accessories, calculator, text editor, task manager, etc., terminal emulator. I think the terminal emulator will be handy. This gives you the ability to go into terminal emulation mode and do a few things that are hard to do in a web environment, such as viewing the receive and transmit communications between Orion and an IED, or between Orion and SCADA. There's also abilities to do some system functions here. Anybody that's worked with Orion understands the use of all these menus, but essentially this gives you another view into the Orion. Pretty much everything here, with the exception of viewing online communications, can be done through the web page. But some people do like to use this view for viewing the communications and doing a few other things. There's a document viewer, image viewer there for graphics. We have a multimedia capability. It's a bit limited, but you can set the sound for volume, etc. And set up their web browser, certain options there. I'll show you what they look like. You can set up some preferences. You can indicate what page you want this to open up to. There's some system functions, a couple of things repeated here, but we do provide some advanced network analyzation. This is the Wireshark screen that opens up. So that's built in, and that'll help you diagnose your Ethernet networks. You can do some desktop settings. You can, of course, set your background, colors, and things like that. Pretty straightforward stuff, pretty much what you do with your PC. This is what you'd see when you log on, pretty much the same thing you'd see with a browsing PC. Midori works very similar to the basic functions in any of the other browsers. So it looks similar to Firefox or some of these other browsers. Another page there, data values, nothing special about that. You can customize your toolbar. Custom pages are also viewable in direct video, of course. This is from a utility in the Midwest. A little bit on customized OrionLX web pages. For those of you that have not worked with them, the pages are created in an open source editor. It's an SVG editor called Inkscape. And of course, photos, PowerPoint images can be embedded into the page. Basic animation, you can conditionally hide or unhide values with the changing of a value above and below a certain analog point, or with a 0 and 1. You can, of course, display real-time values, and you have a blink function. Obviously, direct device control is supported, breaker control, tap changing, that type of thing. Tagging has been recently added. This is the ability to add in an information or operational tag that would restrict or inform operators of some condition that someone encountered. So if somebody hears something that doesn't sound right, they can create a tag, maybe an information tag that says, before you control this device, didn't sound right the last time. You could create a little tag. That tag will come up when someone tries to control that device. There's also operational tags where you create a tag where if somebody tried to either close the device or open or close the device, it would be blocked, and the tag would explain the reason for that. Tags can be installed or created and put on the page based upon user privileges that are preset by the system designer. So you would determine in advance which users, which people with certain login credentials are able to place a tag on the screen or on a controllable device, and also a different set of privileges for who's allowed to remove a tag. So there's some people that maybe don't have the ability to either install or remove. Other people can install, and some people can install and remove. We added tagging functionality as we started replacing some of the conventional PC-based HMIs, because the tagging functions are pretty well established in some of those conventional HMIs. You can customize your header, your link bar, and alarm banners. In some cases, customers don't want to present a bunch of navigation options to people. They just want them to view a one-line diagram, and maybe they don't want them to go to the home page or the files page or the system page. So you can have certain, particularly custom pages with a customized header and link bar. We also created a software tool that a lot of you guys are going to enjoy. We call it indirect addressing. It's a version of a wildcard that lets you design a screen one time if it needs to be used a number of times. For instance, if you have a substation that has 15 feeders, and each feeder has a 351S on it, and let's say you want to have a zoom screen for those 351Ss. Well, instead of creating that zoom screen 15 times with all the links to all the points, because there can be as many as 80 or 100 links if you're creating points with time, instead of having to create a links for 80 to 100 links 15 times, you create it one time and use a wildcard. And that wildcard, or indirect address, would be populated when you hit the URL for that page. So when you link to that Zoom screen, the specific reference for that 351S would be populated into all the places on that page that had that wildcard. A little hard to understand in a 2-minute explanation. We did create a application note, 6 or 7 PowerPoint slides that describes that very succinctly. It's also described in the manual. I think the application note is a little bit more visual, and I think will help folks understand that. But it's almost an essential labor-saving technique if you're creating Zoom screens in particular for an IED that's applied many times in a given substation. Okay, ordering direct video on an Orion LX. The multimedia board can be ordered on any new Orion LX. Ordering the multimedia board forces 2 other Orion LX options. First, it forces the high-performance CPU option. The browsing of web pages and some of the processing that's required for direct video does require us to upgrade the processor. We have a 1.3 gigahertz processor, which is about 3 times more powerful than the standard Orion LX, and that's forced with the direct video multimedia board option. We also have the ability to build in 4 GB of expanded memory on that high-performance CPU card. So that's standard also. Those of you that have purchased Orions in the past know that that 4 GB memory is an option on the standard Orion LX, but we've included it with the high-performance CPU. And also, we are suggesting, not mandatory, that a second Ethernet port be purchased. That just simplifies field upgrade in the future. Field upgrade to go from 1 Ethernet port to 2 in the main chassis is a lot easier if you order it up front. So we're suggesting that the second Ethernet port also be purchased with this. So the resulting model number looks like this. The Orion LX ENEN, that's the second Ethernet port, CPX for the high-performance CPU, XM4, extended memory, and multimedia board. Collectively, that's 1650. And Orion LX in the field can be returned to the factory and retrofitted with direct video. So if you have a unit in the field, you'd like to have it retrofitted, that option does exist for $22.50. There's a VGA monitor and keyboard that we're also providing. This is a very rugged 19-inch rack powered by the substation battery, so you don't have to worry about an inverter or anything like that. Decent resolution, brightness, contrast ratio, good viewing angle, and there are 4 models that we're offering. There's the 48 and 125 DC rack mount or panel for that. A little bit more about the monitor. There's some connections on the back. Not only does it provide a VGA connection, but there's a number of other connections and terminals for power. We also offer a keyboard. You've seen these. This is the slide-out type. It's provided with ears. It's a multi-language keyboard, and it supports touchpad as well. Ordering information, $165. Okay, we've talked about some costs of NERC CIP compliance. Let's summarize some of the costs associated with the Generation 1 Substation HMI, which is a PC running some application software. Second option, the web pages being served out to an industrial PC. And the third option, direct video. Here's the first option. We've looked at half a dozen industrial PCs. It looks like the least expensive for a good ruggedized industrial PC. This is one with a 125 DC power supply, of course no fan or anything like that. We did find one that was as cheap as $2,800, but it seems like more of them are up around $4,000. We're providing some on some projects for some customers for $3,900. So I think that's pretty safe range there. PC-based software, our own NovaView Plus package was $4,000. We know that was fairly competitive in the marketplace. So we're thinking $3,000 to $4,000 for a package. Now I do put an asterisk on there because the annual licensing and maintenance fees can be added onto that. Some packages have mandatory annual licensing fee, which would increase that. And 5 years of NERC compliance costs. Again, this is about a half hour per month per substation PC, which I think most folks that have been in this would think, if anything, is a low number compared to what actually is expended. So we're putting $3,000 to $4,000 down for that for a 5-year compliance cost. That totals up to $8,800 to $11,900. And just another little note, some packages are priced based on the number of points. We did find some packages that get very expensive if you bring back too many relay points. And some relays, of course, as you guys know, you have to pull back quite a few points, and packages, particularly industrial packages, can get very costly if you have too many points. Next, browsing PC. We eliminate some of the PC-based software costs but we do add in some costs for web serving capability on the Orion. We have some fairly powerful software for alarming, trending, sequence of events, and then the 4 GB memory on the browsing or PC option provided in the Orion. Again, the compliance costs, that gets us to $7,500 to $9,500. And finally, direct video, touchscreen monitor, and keyboard, $1,765, the other costs from the previous column. And the high-performance CPU with the 4 GB memory, $1,150. That takes us to $4,565. Again, for the utility users that are attending this webinar, please feel free to contact us after the webinar if you can help us make these numbers more accurate. We'd like to believe that they are, but actual operational experience is always appreciated if you can give us your feedback. The OrionLX video, think of it as a rugged substation HMI without requiring a PC, a rugged substation HMI without NERC CIP issues, and of course that means lower cost. We have 3 new data sheets. There's a data sheet for the multimedia board, another data sheet for the high-performance CPU. This data sheet for the high-performance CPU gives you guidelines in a tabular form of where you need to use the high-performance CPU. And you'll see there's 3 columns there, and it gives you all of these different applications, and it says where do I need to, where is the high-performance CPU not required, where may it be a good idea, and where is it mandatory. So those ones in the bottom right-hand corner of the table, that's where it's mandatory. And then we show an application out in Nebraska where we would suggest strongly the use of the high-performance CPU. And then there's a data sheet for the VGA touchscreen as well. All of these data sheets are available on our website. I don't know if you've been up there recently, but we do get quite a bit of hits to this portion of our website. I'm glad people are using this. Keep this up to date. It's very easy to use. And that's that. Okay, that brings us to the end. We have another webinar that's going to be dedicated to an hour and a half of custom screen development. We're actually going to create a Substation 1 line, an animated one. We may do it with screen captures that are previously captured, but we may do it online as well. It depends how much we want to put into this. An online hour and a half demo in front of 40 people sometimes is a bit intimidating, but whatever we do, it will be representative of the step-by-step process of creating an animated page and linking it with points and doing all that stuff. We'll put tagging on there and everything else. So hopefully we'll be able to see some of you August 23rd, 11 a.m. to 12:30 Eastern Daylight Time. Okay, that's the conclusion of our webinar. Thank you all for attending. Again, this will be posted to our website, so it can be viewed by anybody at any time. And we do these webinars about every 6 weeks. We did another webinar previously. We did a webinar on the PRC 002, dynamic disturbance equipment. And Brian Geringer's presented on that. And again, the next one will be on page creation. Thank you very much for attending.